Last week, we kicked off this series called The Wisdom of God. It's a fun little thing on the start of school. Get it? And why is studying wisdom literature, specifically Proverbs, important? Well, we talk a lot about our values at Refuge Church. A really important part of our community identity is the fact that we love others, we love our enemies, we love our neighbors, we love all of the above. That's a value. That's a principle, right? That's a North Star. And yet sometimes knowing how to walk out that North Star, how to walk out that value, that guiding principle can be difficult, right? Maybe we have two kind of competing values, like we value community and showing up for each other, but we also hold the value of self-care. How do those come together? What if we aren't feeling great and we want to step back from something that we committed to doing? How do we navigate that? Which value wins, right? Wisdom is where that comes into play. So last week we talked about the meaning of the word wisdom in Hebrew is chacham. Say chacham. Amazing. And from cognate languages, we know that it has to do with ruling. Hakim in Arabic just means to rule. Mishle, which is the name of the book of Proverbs, originally in Hebrew, means to rule. It's a form of that word that has to do with being a monarch. Why is that? Imago Dei, being made in the image of God, was a specific royal phrase given to Egyptian monarchs. We're made in the image of God means that we are like a little picture of God walking around the world. That shows up in the New Testament as well. We are invited to exchange our trespasses in order, Romans 5, that we might reign in life through Christ. How do we do that without becoming scary and bad and trying to take over the world and being a dominionist, etc.? We do that by laying our life down, by serving others, not by trying to gain power and resources in order to oppress other people. However, we need wisdom to be able to rule that well, do that well. Last week we looked at Proverbs chapter 3, in which we talked about the ways that we can tell something is wise or not is by the fruit of it. What kind of fruit comes from this way of following God? Is it health and well-being and flourishing of all peoples, or is there a trail of wreckage and hurt and harm behind the person who is telling you something? That's the way that Jesus invites us to evaluate wisdom. That's the way that the text invites us to evaluate wisdom. And then how do we learn it? In relationship with God. God gives us commandments that we can learn, but he also teaches us experientially through our lives, through listening to God, and we knot those lessons on our reins is what we talked about. That was all review. That was all last week. If you weren't here, now you're caught up. Congratulations. This week, we're going to talk about words. We're going to talk about different proverbs that speak about words. If you want to read along with all of the verses that are in my translation, you want to compare them, you're that kind of learner, that's awesome. It's in the Slack under the notes. You can find all of them there. But our first proverb we're looking at today is life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat her fruit. Life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat her fruit. If you grew up in a super Pentecostal or charismatic background, you're probably already familiar with this verse. If you are not, welcome. This is a principle that we actually see the whole way through the story of God, that sometimes it can be easy to notice, not to notice rather, because of the lullaby effect. We've heard these verses, these ideas so many times, it doesn't occur to us that there's a theme there. But unlike the stories in the ancient Near East in which the creator gods made the world through ripping people's bodies apart, God made the world through his words. In the beginning of Genesis, it says that God called to the stars, and the stars were created. He called to things, and they came into being. So he uses his words to create. Jesus, of course, is the word. We see especially in John, talks about that a lot. We have all these principles that show up through the text. We could have talked about a lot of different things that Jesus taught us, but one of them that stands out this particular time is Jesus tells us to speak to the mountain, move, and it will move. Times we think that means tell God through prayer in your heart. Think to yourself, boy, God, it sure would be nice if this mountain would move. Or don't even tell God at all and just think, oh man, this mountain is so big. I hope God takes care of it. That's different than what Jesus taught us, which is to speak to the mountain using our co-creating voice. Apparently, according to Jesus, that actually does something. More principles from the text. Every person who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Again, that is an audible, voice-activated thing. There's other ancient Near Eastern motifs that are in that phrase, and if you're curious about them, you can talk to me about them. But it's word-oriented. We are saying something. We are claiming the lordship of God with our tongue. Blessings and curses are considered by the Bible from the front to the back to be really powerful and important and weighty. They're not just something that you say like, oh, bless you, oh, thank you. A blessing is a really big deal. If we think about the story of Jacob and Esau, Isaac blesses Jacob thinking that it's Esau. Esau is devastated and says, is there no more blessing also for me? And Jacob says, no, Isaac says, oh, I'm sorry, it's gone. Like I said it already. The thing that I said had power. It was important. It meant something. It changed the course of a life. It wasn't just like, here are my hopes for you, kiddo. It was something that carried spiritual power and weight. Curses have the same thing. In the story of Abraham, the translations sometimes make it seem like God tells Abraham in chapter 15, count the stars, and so will your kids be. It doesn't actually say that. It says the word sefer. Say sefer. Sefer is a word that means tell the story, so recount the story to the stars. He's been talking to God and saying, you told me I'm going to have kids. Where are my kids? I don't have an heir. In the grammar, it shows that he's saying this over and over and over. I still don't have an heir. I still don't have an heir. I'm going to have to pick somebody from my household. I'm going to have to pick somebody related to me to be my heir. God finally responds to Abraham, and he says, go underneath the sky and tell the story to the stars. The stars were imagined to be the measures of fate, the things that controlled our destiny. You tell the stars what you think is going to happen. Do you think it will be that your servant Eliezer is going to have to be your heir, or do you choose to believe me? He goes out, he chooses to believe God, he trusts God, and then the text says that God wove it into Abraham's story. It's not just counted. Again, that's a whole thing that I will not get into. The point is, God invites him to say, you tell the story. Which is it going to be? Are you going to believe me? Or are you going to stay in this place of doubt, of uncertainty, of fear? Can we move forward into speaking life into the situation? So it will be. So how is this different than name it and claim it, Elle? This makes me super uncomfortable. This sounds like the prosperity gospel badness. I don't know. Or it sounds like manifesting and like white girl Instagram. Both don't feel great, probably. It's different because name it and claim it is all about consumerism, right? It's all about earning something from God. Like if I'm doing a good job and I'm living a faithful life, I can ask for a private jet and God will give it to me. That's not, the point of life is not the accumulation of possessions. That wouldn't actually be something that's good for me. I don't have anywhere to park a private jet. I cannot financially support a pilot. I can't probably even afford the gasoline for a private jet, even if I wanted to roam the earth with my life choices. That would be self-serving. This is not inviting that, right? This is not talking about how we become billionaires. This is inviting us to bring the kingdom of God into earth, the desires of God around us. Where there's oppression, how do we encounter that oppression? How is it different than manifestation? Manifestation has nothing to do with God, right? It's just relying on the principle of what we say matters. There's some science to that, right? That if we say something about how we are doing, our body responds in agreement. That's some interesting science that you can look up that's out there. If we say, oh, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, our body says, oh, we are, and turns on something. We know some science there, but that has nothing to do with the relationship with God. It's not bringing God into Manifesting is just saying like, whatever I speak will come to pass without, again, having a relationship with God. So that's how that's different. Super important principle, shows up all through the text and sets our table for why it matters what we speak to other people, why it matters what we speak to ourselves, why it matters what we say about our community. If we don't think that anything we say really matters, then why would it matter when we say something bad about ourselves, our friends, our neighbors, right? Why would it matter if we scorn our enemies if it's just words? But if the things we say matter and they set our destiny in some way, if we say about ourselves, nothing really works out for me, I'm not that smart, blah, 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 all the things that shape our self-concept in a negative way, the more we repeat them, the more we believe them, and then they can end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So, biblical principle, setting our table for the things to come. Number 2 and number 3, drive out the scorner and strife will go out. Conflict and contempt will rest. Many of us don't enjoy conflict. I'd bet that most people here are pretty conflict adverse. There might be 1 or 2 people who are like, I don't know, let's go, let's get in there. Most of us don't feel that way. Most of us don't enjoy contempt. Most of us don't enjoy strife. Apparently, what contributes to strife, contempt, and conflict is scorn. Drive out the scorner and strife will go out. So there's an invitation here to think about, why is it that I'm driven to scorn? What actually happens around me when I talk about my enemies, when I talk about people I disagree with, when I talk about people who have betrayed me or hurt me, or this political party or that church over there? When we talk about them with scorn, there's that first principle, even if you're like, oh, that sounds super sketchy, I'm hucking that out. This talks about what happens around us when we enter a situation with scorn, right? The people that we're talking with, they have just learned that we are creating an in-group and an out-group. And the people that we're sharing our scorn with then have an opportunity to wonder whether they are in the in-group or in the out-group. You start to wonder, does this person talk about me this way when I'm not here? If we're willing to speak that way about another person, will that happen to me? Or if they do feel sure that they're in the in-group, then it creates the superiority complex, right? We're not like them. Thank goodness that we're not like that. There's a whole parable teaching of Jesus about people who say, thank God that I'm not like that person. And yet that's so easy for us in our era and culture and the internet culture to feel like, yeah, that's totally fine. I am glad that I'm not like that. We can be glad that we're not experiencing suffering, but scorn alienates us from the suffering of the people that we're talking about, right? It's not something that helps us to love others. It breeds conflict and contempt and strife. Number 2, a man who turns back his word sends out strife, and a whisperer breaks apart yoked chieftains. A man who turns back his word sends out strife. So this is similar to what I was talking about in the introduction. Sometimes when we're trying to thread the needle on, is this a moment where I choose to stay at home and take care of me, or is this a moment where I choose to lean in and do something that's hard because of my value of community and showing up for people? That is an important thing to figure out. That should reflect our values, and we should apply those values with wisdom. It is important to note, if we do decide, you know what, for my well-being and the flourishing of everybody there, I'm going to stay home. When we do that, that's great. And sometimes we can imagine that the effect of that is everybody saying, oh, good for that person. I'm so glad they're taking care of themselves. That probably is the case, knowing our community. We tend to be pretty generous folks. And also, sometimes there can be some strife, not full conflict, not people fighting, being angry with each other, but sometimes there are repercussions when we don't show up. There can be repercussions when we say we're going to do one thing and we're not going to do the other. And when we just check out all the way and walk off stage and say, it'll be fine, does my presence really matter? It does, right? We have things that we do, we have ways of being, we have value in our presence and our voice, and when we pull ourselves out, other people sometimes have to pick up the pieces. So this wisdom, relationship, aspect, right? We talked about last week that it's not a GPS. We don't take this line here and then live our entire lives to say, well, the Proverbs exists, and so now I am never going to not do something that I said I would do again. That's not a recipe for health, but rather we take this with us, we knot it on our reins, and then when we're trying to make that call, we're on the ship, right? We talked about calling out to the other person, saying, I'm going to hoist the rigging, asking them what we should be doing. That was our metaphor for relationship with God last week. A whisperer breaks apart yoked chieftains. So this is the other side of the situation. So somebody's just said, you know what, I can't do that after all. That happens sometimes in life. The whispering part is about the people who receive that news. How should they receive it? Hopefully with grace, generosity, hospitality, care, wanting to ask questions of that person. However, another possibility is that people say one thing and end up whispering, right? Saying, well, I heard that it was because of this. That has the ability to break up an alliance, which keeps people from war. That's the metaphor that's happening there. We do not want to be people who think that it's fine, me saying this little thing, my theory about what's really going on, that does have consequences. It can break down community. It is important. The way we respond to somebody turning back on their word matters, just like somebody deciding to turn back on their word matters. So, reflections, again, what does it do to those around us? Why are we saying yes to things that we don't end up doing? Did we say yes in the first place because we were people-pleasing? Should we say yes in the first place because we tend to overestimate our own abilities? Do we say yes to try to solve a situation which we didn't really need to solve? And then also on the other side of that, are we not following through because we really need to have a break that's good for our well-being? Or are we not following through because it feels like showing up for other people is something that'll drain us, when in fact sometimes showing up for other people is life-giving to us? So there's invitations in here to think about, why is it that I tend to do the things that I do? What narratives am I agreeing with? What kind of path am I walking out? Am I applying things that I could have more curiosity with myself about and just shoving them in my values bucket of like, oh, well, that happens because we want to take care of ourselves. Yes, absolutely. And also, can we apply wisdom with curiosity? So those are things we should avoid. We also have things that we can emulate. So this is probably a famous proverb, although it probably looks different. A tender answer turns back poisonous rage. A cutting word raises hot breath. Many of us have probably experienced this with children, maybe also with spouses and coworkers and friends, but primarily children are most likely to be freaking out at us and saying, if we raise our voice back at the child and say, come on, why are you doing this? Why? That's not going to go well, right? That would be the cutting word raising hot breath. The kid's probably going to reflect that energy back to you, and the whole situation, spirals further. However, if a child is freaking out and you're able to get down to their level and say, hey, what's going on? You okay? I love you. What's happening here? With that tenderness, that often de-escalates the child, right? We can do that with the people all around us, not just with children. We are invited to learn from Jesus, who did this all the time. So in Luke 19, there's this story with the chief tax collector. He has betrayed the people. He thinks that he's making their life easier and protecting them from empire. He thinks that his job is super important and he's helping. But in fact, he is stealing from the people, and the text makes sure to tell us that. So Jesus comes to town. It says that he's short, and he hides in the tree. The tree is not that tall anyway, and it also probably has to do with the fact that he was not loved in his community. People around him might not have been stoked that he was there and present, trying to see the Messiah with the whole rest of them. So there's this energy building in the crowd because of the presence of this man Zacchaeus. And Jesus is walking. He's trying to get to Jerusalem, by the way, so he had a plan. But he stops for the one, something we talked about 2 weeks ago in the ways we pursue justice. And his response in the midst of this brewing trouble is not, get him. right? That could have been one thing that he could have done. We can imagine somebody like Elon Musk being in the bush and how we might feel about the fact that he's there. How does Jesus respond to that presence? Not by saying, get him, not by saying, hey, you call yourself a follower of God and yet you have done these things. He doesn't join in with the crowd. He doesn't admonish the crowd for their feelings about this guy. Instead, with tenderness, he says, hurry and come down. I want to come over for lunch. He uses this hospitality, this good cleverness, this middle way of engaging with the problem that doesn't look like shaming, doesn't look like condemning, doesn't look like telling people what they already know. It's just inviting this person, this enemy of the people, over for lunch. And what happens when he does that is, first off, nobody likes it. People often don't like it when we're not showing up with the amount of strength that they want us to. Tenderness doesn't always please everybody. And yet when Zacchaeus does approach Jesus, he tells him that he's going to give back half of all of his wealth. And for anyone that he has stolen from in the community, he will restore it to them 4 times over. Encountering Jesus brings repentance along with it, right? So when we come into the presence of goodness, holiness, light, that tends to shape us in the way of that light, to want more of it, to not to want to continue to sow darkness. And we see that happen in that story. John 8, once again, there's a woman who is caught. Jesus could have engaged with that crowd in a lot of different ways. He could have said, where's the man? He could have said, well, I'm not sure. What exactly did you catch her doing? He could have engaged with the crowd and yelled at them. He could have tried to rescue her in different ways. But what he said instead to the crowd is reminding them of their shared equality in making mistakes. Yes, it seems that this woman has made a mistake, and yet so have all of us. And so therefore, let the one who has not made any mistakes be the first to throw a stone. There's a tenderness, there's a humility there, which captures the crowd who's trying to catch Jesus in error as well, and they all disperse. And then he turns to her and says, neither do I condemn you, which is important because he hasn't sinned, right? Unlike the crowd. Now go and do not sin again. So it's not that he just gives her a pat on the head, right? He still addresses the situation and what is going on. He meets us in the situation where we're at, means he sees the circumstances of the situation. He addresses it. He's not blind to what we've done. And yet he believes in her ability to go and sin no more, to be free when she's not under the weight of condemnation. So Jesus, what am I doing with my hand here? He harnesses, there it is. He's harnessing the power of tender answer over cutting words, and we're invited to do the same. Another famous proverb on our words, amiable words, are honey from the comb, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. So the last one is about tenderness can resolve a situation that's brewing. Tenderness can break through other people's hostility and aggression. This is about how our words can be life-giving to people who really need help. So a story from Mark 10. Again, Jesus is going, I think he's in the same city. I think he's in Jericho, and he's still trying to get to Jerusalem. And again, there's a big mob that he's trying to get his way through, and somebody starts heckling him and yelling, hey, son of David, hey, Messiah, have mercy on me. Come on, Jesus, I'm over here, Jesus of Nazareth. And the crowd, it says, goes back and forth with this man saying, be quiet, stop, hey, shh, that's not what's happening right now. He's walking, he's not doing a healing session, whatever they're saying to him. The crowd's not enjoying this. But he cried out all the more. May we have the audacity of Bartholomew when we approach Jesus to believe that our suffering matters that much to God, that he will stop what he's doing in order to tend to us. And Jesus does exactly that. He responds to this man's belief that his suffering matters. He responds to his request. He stops going where he's going. He wades through the crowd and gets to him. And he could have said, I healed you, bye, right? He's God. He could have put his God goggles on and known that this man was blind and he needed help. Sometimes we do see that in the story when he says, you've already been made well, toodles. Instead, he models tenderness, amiable words, being a source of healing to people, crouches down with this man and takes the time to say, what is it that you want from me? What is it that you want from me? Some of us could hear that this morning, that Jesus cares about what we want, that he doesn't just have instructions and things we're supposed to do. He is right there beside us asking, what is it that you need? What is it that you want me to do for you? He does that for us, but he also shows Bartholomew who he is. His amiable words make space for this man to receive freedom, deliverance from his suffering. He takes away his blindness, because that is what Bartholomew wanted, and they all go on their merry way. Last story, John 21. Peter, of course, at the crucifixion, Peter had his chance to be the leader that he had been growing into, to gather the disciples to say, this is our plan, this is what we're going to do, let's be together, let's pray, etc. Peter doesn't occupy his leadership role that he has as the oldest disciple. Instead, he runs and he hides and he's by the fire, and 3 times he says, Jesus, I don't know him. 3 times. Jesus is within earshot, makes eye contact with him, rises from the dead. It's got to be awkward. Is in the room with Peter 2 times and doesn't talk about it, but then they're having brunch on the shore after Peter has gone back to fishing. So Peter hasn't anointed himself as a great rabbi. He hasn't started going around teaching. Jesus meets him on the shore. And instead of saying, what's wrong with you? Right? Well, how could you do that? My people needed you, and you left. Instead, he gives him 3 times the opportunity to reestablish his love, to tell Jesus 3 times, erasing the other 3 times, that he does love him. And therefore, Jesus does not make him earn anything. Jesus doesn't ask for a great test. He just trusts him with this responsibility. If you do love me, you're qualified, despite your failings, to feed my sheep. And he tells him that 3 times. Those words that Peter received from Jesus gave him the strength to carry on the absolutely wild life of adventure that God had for him, which involved great joy and community, but also incarceration and persecution and suffering before he was eventually murdered. The amiable words of Jesus, who no doubt felt the pain of that betrayal. He had his friends within earshot, and they didn't do anything for him. That betrayal of Jesus had to have impacted his soul, and yet he turns to Peter and gives him an opportunity to do what? Oh, to use his words, to say something which undoes the suffering that Peter has been experiencing and brings him in to a new identity, a new role, a new calling. Our takeaways, therefore, this morning are to think about primarily, especially if we haven't studied the idea that the words of life and death matter. Number 1, takeaway, God implores us not to speak death over ourselves and others. Our words matter. They're the primary way we create change in our world. If you want to think about that more, talk about it more, ask more questions, that's awesome. We'll do that in discussion together. But that's the first thing that we can take away from this wisdom literature. Number 2, Jesus spoke life by choosing gentleness and good cleverness over winning by force. 2 weeks ago, we talked about finding the middle way, that as we try to make peace in the broken world, as we're putting the world back together alongside Jesus, how sometimes there's this sneaky middle way, a third option. We talked about the story of an on-campus evangelist who's yelling things at people that are hateful and telling them how they're going to go to hell through a big bullhorn, and the students gather together, and one of them, instead of telling him, hey, you're wrong, hey, stop, hey, we have a church over here, he says something else, hey, that's not the gospel, I'm not trying to convince the crowd or convince the man. Instead, that student played He Is Jealous for Me from 2005. And the students were able to join in and sing alongside that one student, and the power of their speaking what the good news really is, what the gospel really is, caused the person yelling hatred at the campus to stop, right? That's a good cleverness, that's a gentleness, an amiableness that not only diffuses the situation, but brings life to people. So may we be people who are able to, alongside the Spirit, lean into not just the value of loving people, but lean into this wisdom of finding, Spirit, help me find this middle way in which I can invite my enemy to have lunch with me, in which I can diffuse a situation by reminding everyone that we have all sinned. How can I diffuse this situation, bring healing to someone who is suffering by inviting them into a role, reminding them of who I have been leading them to become, the things that they are qualified for? These are the tactics of Jesus. May we be people who set aside scorn, even when it feels good in the moment. May we be people who stop speaking death casually about ourselves and our neighbors and our future and our community. Lord, be with us during this time where we sing another song to you. We know that we have not done all of these things well. I have spoken things that are not helpful about my community, about my enemies. Pray that you would give all of us greater awareness over the words that we say, the narratives that we believe about ourselves and our neighbors in our city. Meet us in the gap between who we hope to be and who we find ourselves to be this morning. Remove the desire for scorn from us. Remove the pride that tells us that we deserve to get to be scornful. Help us to dwell in gratitude that we get to be your kids, that we get to use our voice to bless other people, to find a middle way. Give us wisdom as we think on all these things. Pray this in your name.